I just want to say, today's a big day. And you may be saying, Caroline, what makes today so special? I literally just picked today to be the day that I film my top 24 books of 2024, which I'm so excited about. I did one of these videos last year, the top 23 books of 2023, and I'm grateful that it's 2024 because let me tell you, the books at the end, like the books getting cut, it was hard to decide. And I also do not rank my nonfiction books, or I don't rate them. I guess I don't rate my nonfiction books. And because I don't rate them, I'm not including them in the ratings. Though last year I did include nonfiction books in the ratings, I think, because one of my top books was The 10 Tomatoes That Changed the World, which I stand by that. I think about that book all the time. But I wanted to start off this video with but I will be including a few honorable mentions in this video for books that are nonfiction and are not making my top cut. Another disclaimer is that I don't normally buy books. If I buy a book, it's because I love that book so much. And so I did buy my top 2 books of the year this past weekend. Or it's not weekend, this past week. I bought them like on Thursday. I don't think I own any of the other books. I may have some of them still from the library because I haven't returned them yet, but I'm a big library user. Anyway, we are going to start at the bottom of the list, the American Royals series. I do put my series together, so I'm not saying that like the first book or the second book or the third book is number 24. The last book was my favorite, but I liked all of the books and I love the world that is built in that series. I think it's so fun. It's just a little like YA reality TV show in a book form, and I loved it. It was so fun to read. I'm pulling up my Goodreads because that's where I write my reviews and find out what I said. So I rated the first 3 books 3 stars, and then the 4th book I rated 4 stars. But overall, I would say it's a 4-star series. Oh, it looks like I gave the first book 3.5 stars. It's clean and trashy, which is a combination it's hard to come by. And I also enjoyed how it wasn't super predictable. Like there were questions about even the romances were not super predictable, which I really liked. By the end of it, I was totally engaged and I loved the series. Number 23 is How to Solve Your Own Murder. This was a fun little mystery. It was written by an author who normally writes YA books, I believe, and so it felt very young and fun. It's a little cozy mystery and it's told in 2 timelines, which I always love. If you are a big fan of intellectual books, I would not recommend this book just because it is written sort of in that young way. But for me, I really like that. Number 22, we have a book that I'm sure is ranking much higher for some other people's book ranking lists, and that is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. I did really enjoy this. Normally rom-coms don't rate or rank super high for me, but this was a really good one. The other disclaimer that I should say is I have read 150 books this year, so the fact that they're in my top 25, that is very, like, it still means that I really enjoyed them. Coming in at number 21, we have Powerless by Lauren Roberts. This is just a fun, fast-paced fantasy. It had all of these great fantasy tropes that are in other novels that were really fun, but it did feel a little bit like it was copying those books, and that's why I didn't rate it higher. It still was so fun to read, and I am excited for the 3rd book to come out next year. Next up we have Caraval. I really enjoyed the whole Once Upon a Broken Heart Caraval series. Like both of those series, just the world there. It was so fun and so magical, and I flew through them. I remember finishing Caraval, and I was at home, and my sister had it on her shelf, and I called her because I was like, where is the next book? She was like, oh, it's not at home. And I was like, oh, so it's at your apartment? Like you have it with you, I can come and get it from you? And she's like, no, I don't own it. And I was a little bit flabbergasted because she owns more books than I do, but also I was like, how do you own the first book and not own all of them for this series? But coming from me, who doesn't own any books, practically, that is sort of unrealistic to expect. But I really enjoyed the books and the magical feeling of the Caraval series. Coming in at number 19, we have Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. I really, really remember enjoying the book and how it was a COVID story, but in a good, like it brought back the happy moments of COVID, of being together with my family in quarantine. And so I really enjoyed that. It also had the dual timeline sort of thing, and the mystery and the family elements were so sweet. So I really enjoyed that one. Next up, we have A Court of Thorns and Roses. The whole series is going in here. I read this series back in like July, and I knew I was getting into a deep series when I did this, and that's what I love about all of the Sarah J. Maas series that I've read, or both of the series that I've read, is that you can really immerse yourself in the world. The Throne of Glass series is ranked at number 17 for me, and that one was also really good. I don't have TikTok normally on my phone, but whenever I finished one of those books, I would download the TikTok app and watch TikToks about it because it was fun to see like what memes you could make out of the different scenes, and I thought that was so fun. Also, Sarah J. Maas is a good writer and she's just a good world builder, so that made those series really fun to read. I want to read Crescent City in the new year, but I'm also intimidated, and that's the thing. I wouldn't recommend these books to you if you're not a huge fantasy lover and you don't have time to get into such a deep series, because they are a lot, and it took me like 2 months to read through all of Throne of Glass, and so it was an investment. Coming in at number 16, we have the reappearance of Rachel Price. I remember finishing this book when I was on a walk in the spring, and I was so invested. The mystery kept me guessing to the very end. I also was able to predict some things though, so that was fun because the gratification of being able to guess what happens is just a fun experience to have. Number 15, we have a book that I think is very underrated, and I've talked about this book before. It is The Enlightenment of Bees. This is a book that does have some romance, but it's also a romantic book because of the traveling, the descriptions of that, the romance of life, I guess you could call it. And I enjoy books that are romantic in that they are not a romance story, but they are the romance of life, and The Enlightenment of Bees did that for me. Next up at number 14, we have a novel love story by Ashley Poston. I think it's Poston. I know a lot of people did not like this book so much, but I thought it was beautiful. I loved how it made me want to be a writer, not because I actually want to be a writer, but just because of how this book had that romance of life thing in it. I think if you go into it expecting a romance, it's not as good, but going into it and being transported into that other world was so cool. And also, I just think Ashley Poston is a great writer. I also read some of her other books this year, and The Dead Romantics is not making this list at all, but reading that book, I could recognize how good the writing was without it being a top book for me, just because I didn't like certain aspects of it, but the writing was so good, and that is something that I've seen across all of the Ashley Poston books that I've read, that the writing just feels very magical, and I love that. Next up, we have Maybe in Another Life by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I love Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I decided that I wanted to read her whole backlist this year, and so I did. I mean, I think there may be some other like really older ones, but I've read most of her books. And I'm very excited for Atmosphere to come out next year. I said in my review, I love how Taylor Jenkins Reid writes literary fiction with the pace and feel of a romance novel. Maybe in Another Life addressed the question I have certainly asked myself: how would my life be different if I made one different choice? This story, told in parallel timelines, is intertwined with love, friendship, grief, loss, and so much more. I completely lost track of time while reading and constantly wanted to get back into this world. Well-deserved 4.5 stars. Next up at number 12, we have Firefly Lane by Kristen Hanna. I read some of my first Kristen Hanna this year and I loved it. Firefly Lane also is a TV show that I've already seen most of it. My mom and I watched it back in 2021, I believe. And so I knew a little bit about what Firefly Lane, what I was getting into, and I really enjoyed it. There was something about it that I can't quite put my finger on that I was just sort of like, not 5-star, but maybe that was just right book, wrong time. I'm not sure. Now we're getting into the books that are very close to 5 stars, but a lot of them just don't hit the mark. Coming on at number 11, we have Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. This is a really, really good book. I enjoy Fredrik Backman's writing. I think he's, like Ashley Poston, is a really good writer and really encapsulates the human experience, and he had a lot of great lines, and it provided a really in-depth look at all of our characters. He wasn't picking and choosing, which I really appreciated, and showing us how all of them have flaws, but also they all have beautiful stories. So it was just a really cool life sort of book. And now before we get to our top 10 books, I want to go through a few non-fiction honorable mentions. Starting off, we have MWF Seeking BFF by Rachel Birchie. This book was really cool because it's about a woman trying to go on friend dates in her 20s and 30s, I think she is. And it was really cool because I know I am about to enter the real world, I guess I'm already in the real world, but the like post-grad world where I'm gonna have to get a job and make friends And that's a little bit scary to me if I'm in a totally new place and don't have any friends. And this book gave me a lot of peace that like, okay, it's gonna be fine. I'm gonna make friends. I also want to give an honorable mention to Katie Ledecky's memoir. I think out of all the memoirs I've read this year, hers was my favorite just because it made me really respect her as a person. I've never really been a big Katie Ledecky fan, but after reading this book, I would say I am a Katie Ledecky fan just because she's so down to earth. One brief grocery store intermission later and taking an exam, I'm back and I have my third honorable mention for nonfiction books, and that is The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. I do still have this from the library. I'm about to go return it this afternoon, but I didn't want to return it until I finished filming this video because this book was really, really good. And I think I will continue thinking about these things, and it's a book that I probably should be reading every year because I would highly recommend. It talks all about how you can live slower, live more like Jesus, and it was just a really good read. So I would recommend. Pulling out the list again because we've made it to the top 10. Coming in at number 10, we have The Ministry of Time by Kayleigh Bradley. This book was super duper unique, and I liked that about it. Let's see what I said in my review. The writing was super duper beautiful. That was really good. It was almost a 5 stars. I think if I had read it on paper rather than listening to the audiobook, it could have been a 5-star read. And it was really interesting how it commented on modern society and how we've changed in the past 100 years. And it also made my brain hurt a little bit. But Kayleigh Bradley, you get all the points. You're a good author. I'm excited to read whatever you come out with next. Number 9 is The 7-Year Slip. Ashley Poston is back again for another highly rated book. I really, really enjoyed this book. First off, the fact that the main character's name is Clementine and goes by Lemon, I think about that all the time because that is such a cute name and such a cute nickname for it. And Ashley Poston is just a great writer, and I love magical realism. So I would recommend, if you are a fan of magical realism, definitely read that book. Also, the way it incorporated baking into the book was just so cute and fun and sweet, and I loved it. Number 8, we have one of my favorite authors, Catherine Senner. Love Catherine Senner. Things You Save in a Fire. Maybe it was just my reading experience of reading this book in a hammock outside, but I love this book. It was such a cute. Catherine Senner really has the balance between romance and literary fiction down pat, and so I really enjoyed that about this book. Next up is The Wishing Game by Meg Schaefer. I love the puzzly mystery aspect of this book. I thought it was so cute. I said in my review it felt like a children's book for adults, and I think that is very true. It just felt so wholesome and cozy. It had a lot of really sweet relationships between the characters and a really fun setting, and just the magical feel of it was really nice. So number 7 for that one. Number 6 is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I had put off this book for a long time, and I'm really happy that I got to it because, again, it had that magical feeling to it that was so sweet and fantasy, but at the same time not. Okay, I'm been sitting on my knees for this video, and it's not always the most comfortable. I have written that the ending sort of let me down, but the writing overall was super lyrical and sweet, so that kept it at that high 4 stars. So many of these highly ranked books I want to reread, but there are so many other books that I still want to read that how many will I actually reread? I don't know. Next up, we have Just Last Night by Fari McFarlane. I read this because Haley Pham recommended it, and if you know me, Haley Pham was like my big sister. I mean, I have a real big sister, but if I have to pick a big sister from the internet, it's Haley Pham. I've watched her since I was probably a freshman in high school, and so that's 8 years. I've watched her for a long time, so she feels like my sister. And I loved how this story incorporated grief, romance, friendship, life, change, all of these different themes in it, and had super lyrical writing, which, if you know me, I love the lyrical writing. And I said I love the setting. I think the main reason I love the setting is because I read it shortly after I came back. Yeah, a month after I came back from England, and it mentioned things that I remembered from England, like Marks and Spencer, I think was one of them. And so it felt very familiar. Number 3, we've made it to, no, number 4. We're still in the top 4. Ooh. Number 4 is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. Nightingale by Kristen Hanna was my first 5-star of the year, but I read it shortly before Just Last Night. Oh my goodness. If you are a historical fiction person, if you like sad books, if you like World War II books, if you like Kristen Hanna books, if you like the lyrical writing, read The Nightingale. It was really sad and really beautiful, and the sister relationship and their relationships with other people and the fact that they are morally gray and they are changing and growing up was so beautiful. And the way Vianne and Isabelle both rebelled against authorities in different ways and having the strong sense of duty and not wanting to resist even though something is wrong. I'm trying to say this without spoiling it. Like seeing in this book how the characters are grappling with that sense of duty and also the sense of doing the right thing, because sometimes your duty is not the right thing. Sorry, that was a long tangent, but I really appreciated how I could relate to the characters in that deeper sense, and it challenged these things inside me. Anywho, top 3 books, a little bit of a lighter note for our next one, which is another Catherine Center book. Oh my goodness, The Rom-Commers by Catherine Center. The fact that a romance book has my top 3 spot for the year. Like, it's purely romance. I mean, maybe it's literary fiction, but like, it's a romance book is in my top 3, which is, I feel like, rare. Like, I feel like normally you have to combine the genres for me. I said I've never ranked a rom-com 5 stars, but this one was so well done because it was a slow burn, which I always love because that means that there is more to the story than just the romance. Catherine Center spent so much time developing backstories and the other relationships and the setting that it really made it special. Had my jaw on the floor at times. The crossovers with The Bodyguard was really cool, and acts of service, the heartwarming moments. I really want to reread this book, but again, there's so many other books that I want to read, so it's gonna be a while before I reread it, but it was a really good book. Also, my reading experience for it was really good. I read it in the middle of the summer on the lake, and it was just really fun. And I was with my family. I'm so excited for my top 2 books because I've just bought these. I'm gonna reread them. I know I will because I just bought them and I have the physical books. Guys, hear me out. Hear me out. Number 2, Lovely War by Julie Berry. Please read this book. This is historical feeling. It feels historical. No, it is historical. This is historical fantasy romance, which is my favorite genre. I consider Divine Rivals being historical fantasy romance, even if it's not like actually historical, it feels historical. This is a World War I love story told from the perspective of the Greek gods and goddesses. The love story is so beautiful. I was almost crying, staying up late, had to listen to the audiobook, but mostly read it on paper, thankfully, because audiobooks I don't enjoy as much as physical books. And holy cow, it was so good. The only thing that knocks points is the Greek goddesses and gods telling the story. I didn't always get the plot because they had like their own plot going on, and I didn't always understand that. So I'm excited to reread it and see if I can understand it a little bit more. But other than that, this was perfect. I love this book so much, and I'm excited to read it again. This and my number 1 book, both of them, I got to the end, finished reading them, and went straight back to the beginning. I was like, I have to read this again. Like, I want to reread the beginning. Okay, it cut me off and I'm not exactly sure when, but we're just gonna pick up with my number 1 book, which is, drumroll please, The Book of Doors by Gareth Brown. I love this book so much. This book encapsulates what it feels like to read a book. It tells the story of our main character, Cassie, who works in a bookshop, and one of her regular customers passes away and leaves her a little book that is called The Book of Doors. And she discovers that when she's holding this book, any door is every door, so she can open a door and it transports her to another person. And eventually she learns that there are these other books that, like the Book of Pain, the Book of Joy, the Book of Suffering, all of these different books that have different powers. And there are book collectors and booksellers and book thieves and all of these different people that circulate different books. Oh my goodness. I fell in love with this book. I can't wait to reread it. I currently am rereading my favorite books from 2023, Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows. So Divine Rivals does count to my current book tally of 150 books. But once I finish rereading those, I really want to go back to this book and then this book. And I sort of want to reread The 10 Tomatoes That Changed the World, which was another one of my favorite books from 2023. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it gave you some suggestions of what to read. Please, please, please pick up both of these books if you get anything from this video, because they are both so good. And with that being said, I will see you in our next video. I feel like I'm alternating between Christmas vlogs and book videos, and I will be doing that probably for the rest of the year because there's so much fun Christmas stuff happening and also with the end of the year book stuff happening. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in our next one.